So listen, when you go back to the ancient past, the more and more, being real, African is gonna look. I'm just been throwing it out there. It's gonna look raw. It's gonna look African. It's gonna look peculiar.
Elimelech, a Bethlehemite, emigrated to Moab with his wife, Naomi, and his 2 sons during a famine in the land of Israel. His sons, Mahlon and Chilion, married 2 Moabite girls named Ruth and Orpah. After the deaths of Elimelech and his sons, Naomi and Ruth left Moab and went to Bethlehem. There, their relative Boaz bought from Naomi all the property that had been owned by Elimelech and his sons and married Ruth. Obed, the son of Boaz and Ruth, was the grandfather of King David.
It's gonna sound off because you've been immersed into the Greek culture. You've been immersed, just like how they was Hellenized, you've been Americanized.
In the same consonant, there were group as season in the English Bible. Then also it's what? That is talking about heat period. You know, Eshe is cold. Eshe talking about fire. That is a very hot period. Those 3 words were gathered together in the English Bible as what? As seasons. So you see that now getting these words out like this, what is helping us to be able to understand details, the information, the mind of the ancient writers of these books.
The ancient past.
A Boa reading and interpretation of Ruth 3. The Boa people are an agricultural society living in the central eastern part of the Republic of Mali in West Africa. Their ethnic name contains the element Bo, true plural, Boa. Their language is called Bomu. Reading the story of Ruth through the eyes of the Boa, a number of details are put into an understandable context. Naomi's protest to her daughters-in-law, "I am too old to have a husband," Ruth 1.12, would be understood as the state of a widow of honorable age who no longer needs to remarry to maintain her place in the society. Her question, "If I should bear sons, would you tarry for them until they were grown?" is understood rhetorically. The sons would be too young to be acceptable marriage partners to Ruth and Orpah. Boaz tripped to the gate to present his case to the elders and to the family member with first rights to marry Ruth appears as a quite natural and expected step within Boa culture. Naomi's mention of the night or tonight presupposes that there had already been contact between the two. The time designation is merely indicating that this is the next step, a decisive step in which an initial general interest leads to exploring the possibilities of marriage. The fact that Naomi does the planning in this case would indicate that Boaz is considered to be a son of Elimelech within the clan. If Boaz were considered to be of Elimelech's generation, a brother, he could marry Naomi if the ages were compatible. If Boaz were a generation lower, and thus a brother of Mahlon and Chilion, then in Boaz society he would have the right to marry Ruth or Orpah, but not Naomi.
Is telling Ruth exactly what to do. All right, she's saying, hey, wait till he's eaten, wait till he gets in the bed, then come unto him. All right, remember what we just read in chapter 2. He is near of kinsman, all right, unto her late husband. All right, read on.
Spending the whole night together is logically the next step at this stage of interest in one another. Those listening to the story of Ruth already know that Boaz and Naomi are people with upright characters. There would be no ulterior motives at the meeting. Neither of them would use trickery or manipulation to force a marriage by sexual advances. Due to the family relationships between Naomi and Ruth and between Naomi and Boaz, it is clear that the context is a normal one for a marriage between Ruth and Boaz. Boaz's reply shows he understood the situation and acted accordingly. There was another family member with first rights. Boaz would see to it that the matter was taken care of. Within the Boa culture, it is unacceptable that a woman who has the right to marry remains unmarried. A family which is not able to provide partners for the widows from among the men inside the family is not a family.
Joseph Williams' book called Hebrewism in West Africa, which points to, if you go into West Africa, the people of the Ivory Coast, Guinea, Senegal, Nigeria, Togo, Benin, I've been to these places, they all have Hebraic roots.
The word for blacksmith,
Okay.
Okay.
Then blacksmiths, women, they are the one who makes the pottery with clay mud.
Okay.
So they are known, this is their activity. So they are a special family, they marry between them.
Okay.
Blacksmiths, girl marry blacksmith
Okay.
boy. So they cannot mix with
Other
with
people.
the
Okay.
other,
Okay.
in order to keep the heritage of the family.
Okay.
As a Boa adage goes, if Ruth were to remain unmarried, this would be understood to be a shame to Ruth herself, but even more so to Boaz and to the family of Elimelech. Boaz knew who in the family had the most right to marry Ruth. Ruth's request would be understood to mean, "Cover me with your blanket," with the metaphorical significance parallel to a Boa expression "Sudarani hide me," i.e., preserve my honor, prevent me from shame by marrying me. Such a request is entirely fitting within the context of Ruth being a widow, Boaz being an eligible marriage partner within Ruth's generation within the patriarchline, and Naomi's knowledge and approval of the meeting. The threshing floor's location is related to the setting at the end of the harvest season. In Boa culture, groups spend the nights together in harvest time under the full moon. But sex in such a situation is not imaginable because of the cultural taboos in regard to sexuality mentioned above and because of the strict prohibition of sexual relationships outside of the village. In Boa society, there is no connection between pagan worship rites and sexual practices at harvest time, as is suggested in the OT for Canaanite society, Hos 1.9. A connection which is used by some interpreters as background for a sexually tinted reading of Ruth 3.
That looks like an African. Look at the head. You know how they got them little tiny heads? You see that? You see the tiny heads they got? Now, look, look. And this is a Canaanite. When you get into this book, this is a sculpture of a Canaanite. Now, when you look at me, my facial features are totally different than the facial features of this Canaanite.
So a lot of Israelites, they get that ideology in their head that Ruth had to be an Israelite because she was in the lineage of Christ.
Of how can Ruth at one breath be a Moabite, but then the law state they can't come amongst the people to the 10th generation.
We're going to read the book of Ruth to get some understanding today.
Before we turn to an analysis of Eleph for a secondary subdivision in Old Israel, we can get a somewhat more detailed conception of the scope and functions of the Mishpachah, particularly by examining what is said about the Mishpachah in the book of Ruth and some related passages in Leviticus and Numbers. In a sense, the entire book of Ruth is an explication in popular form of the function of the Mishpachah. Regrettably, the narrative form pays little attention to explaining the social forms and functions that underlie the action, with the exception of a brief note on the customary and contractual meaning of drawing off the sandal. 4:7. The general plot is well known. It concerns a decimated family of Ephrathites from Bethlehem. 1:2, who, in order to escape famine, lived for some time in Moab. At the death of Elimelech, the head of the family, and of his two sons, Elimelech's widow Naomi and Mahlon's widow, the Moabitess Ruth, returned from Moab to Bethlehem. There they meet Boaz, who is described as follows. Now Naomi had a moda, preferring cover K and MT of her husband's, a man of wealth, of the Mishpachah of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. 2:1. Moda, from the verb to know, may be rendered as a known kinsman, which is further defined as one who belonged to the same Mishpachah as Elimelech.
So here's an example, according to the law, where the Most High God justified the marriage between what, an Israelite and an heathen, somebody outside of the nation of Israel.
All we need is your explanation there, real brief, so that he can continue answering further. Maybe he shouldn't have asked you this question.
So they applied the law.
We need you to be brief, concise, and answer the question.
And what was he applying? Or what were they applying? Give me that in Deuteronomy chapter 25 and verse 5.
Does the Lord do things to break his own law?
A lot of you may be wondering, how is that lawful that these Israelites married heathen women?
Like, are you saying they broke the law to bring Ruth in?
All right, she's saying, hey, wait till he's eaten, wait till he gets in the bed, then come unto him. All right, remember what we just read in chapter 2. He is near of kinsman, all right, unto her late husband.
To make it even more concise, are you saying that they broke God's law to bring Ruth in?
Naomi said, hey, this man Boaz, he's near of kin unto us, kin unto us, kin unto us.
Because some of y'all in here are mulattoes, mulattoes, half-breeds. Ruth the Moabite still had to be honored. She was the great-great-grandmother of Solomon. Still had to be honored. I don't know if it's the great-great-grandmother, but I know she's in that line somewhere. So don't quote me on that. Y'all can look it up. So she still had to be honored. So those of you with Edomite mothers, you still have to honor them. You cannot disrespect them. Run to the Chinese for comfort, see if they accept you. Get out of here. Get out of here, nigga. Nigga, go, nigga.
I'm really disgusted at this point, and because you had the audacity to say what you said about you understand King David's grandmother.
Naomi further explains Boaz's social position to Ruth. The man is Garov to us. He is one of our Golim. 2:20. When Ruth remarks on her overtures to Boaz, she tells him you are a Gul, to which Boaz replies with personal appreciation but with the further clarification. It is true that I am a Gul. There is, however, a Gul more Garov than I. 3:12. How are the terms Garov and Gul to be understood in this context? Orov is the common Hebrew adjective for near or close and is applied to proximity of person, place, or time. Here the meaning is obviously of person, i.e., Boaz is a near relative of Naomi and Ruth, but he also knows of a man who is a nearer relative than himself. Gul, a participle functioning as a noun, derives from gul, to buy back or to restore the property, person, or honor of someone, specifically by fulfilling the role of gul, kinsman protector, on behalf of someone with a prescribed social claim to merit the activation of the practice or institution of the geola, kin protection or kin restoration. It is permissible to speak of the Gul as redeemer provided that the English term is shorn of all later and secondary allusions to moral or spiritual salvation. The joining of Gorov and Goel in Boaz's reply to Ruth indicates that the primary criterion of nearness is Boaz's eligibility to perform the role of protector or restorer of his and Elimelech's mishpachah by marrying Ruth and serving a son who will continue the line of the threatened Beth Av of Elimelech. As the story later makes it clear, this also involves paying off the debt on a small piece of land that belongs to Elimelech's line. As least that seems the most likely interpretation. 184 Thus to serve as a Goel means in this instance to be the protector or restorer of the Beth Av of Elimelech by assuring the deceased a continuing line of male heirs and a piece of land to sustain the Beth Av. Boaz acknowledges that he is a potential Goel on behalf of Elimelech and thus also of Naomi and Ruth, but he also indicates that he is not first in the line of potential Golim. He knows of one who has the first option on the role of Gul, and, as the story develops, Boaz is only free to marry Ruth when the man with the first option declines on the grounds that to marry Ruth and pay off the debt on the plot of ground would jeopardize his own patrimony. What is it that constitutes the eligibility of Boaz and of the unnamed nearer relative to serve as Goel for the Beth Divi of Elimelech? They are clearly not of the immediate house of Elimelech, for all males of that house have perished. What constitutes their eligibility is that they are members of the same mishpachah as was Elimelech, i.e., their Beth Dvath are grouped together in a larger mishpachah to which Elimelech's Beth Divi belonged. But the role of Goel is not equally open to all male members of the mishpachah simultaneously. Eligibility to act as Goel follows a prescribed order according to degrees of nearness to and distance from the kinsman to be restored. The story of Ruth tells us nothing in detail about this order of eligibility to act the Goel, and the evidence for reconstructing any order is meager and rendered particularly confusing by the several functions which are embraced in the Old Testament. under the work of the goal. The narrative continues. V2. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. Mahlon has been considered a derivative from the Hebrew root 757, to be sick, though Campbell prefers to see it as the derivation of the Arabic mahala, meaning either barrenness or craftiness. According to Ruth R 2.5, the name Mahlon is connected by sound resemblance to the root 7713, annihilate, blotted out from the world. In any case, the connection with sickness or barrenness implies the general idea of death, which is antonymous to the notion of fertility. Narrative of Ruth 4 simply reports that he was born and that the women of Bethlehem recognized in him one who would care for Naomi in her old age. Their exclamation, "A son is born to Naomi," which was of course not biologically true, expresses a reversal of the loss of offspring and inability to bear more sons. That was the heart of Naomi's words to her daughters-in-law in chapter 1. The naming of the boy is strange, with no suitable pattern or wordplay such as is typical of many naming scenes in biblical material, although the narrative suggests that this child should carry on the line of Naomi's deceased son Mahlon. 1 Samuel 17:12 reads, "Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem of Judah, named Jesse." Since Bethlehem and its location in Judah are explicitly mentioned, the title Ephrathite could hardly be a second reference to Jesse's place of residence, namely of Bethlehem, suggested by the dictionaries. It surely points to an additional element in Jesse's identity. The same is true of Ruth 1:1-2. A certain man of Bethlehem of Judah went to Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons, Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. The definition Ephrathites is not a third reference to Bethlehem, but an additional element of the family's identity. In both cases, Ephrathites refers to these people's tribal or familial affiliation, which could be explained in 2 different, though connected ways. The one is to regard the gentilic form M7DX as having throughout one meaning, that is, Ephraimite. According to this view, both Jesse, and of course his whole household, and the family of Elimelech were identified as Ephraimites, living in the town of Bethlehem in Judah.
David called the Ziphims Zawar, strangers, because even though they were from his own tribe, they were treating David like they didn't know him. That's why David said this in Psalm 69:8. It says, "I am become a stranger unto my brethren." See, David said he was a stranger to his own brethren. And when you look the word stranger up in this verse, you see that it's number 2114, and it's the Hebrew word zawar. So let's get some understanding. The Hebrew word zawar is used to describe an enemy as well as someone who is estranged or alienated from someone else. For example, the Ziphims was supposed to have love for David because David was their brethren. But instead, they turned their backs on David. So David called them strangers, zawar, because they had become his enemies. Now, the word zawar is also used to describe anybody that's in another person's position or in a place that they shouldn't be in. That's why when you look it up, you see that it says another. It's talking about someone doing something other than the person you expect to be doing it.
Priesthood, right? I don't have a problem with him saying that, because the fact is this: we don't got no temple to go into to execute the office of a priesthood presently, regardless. See what I'm saying? And then, even when you go into the scriptures, the Hamashiach is supposed to be setting up Zadok and his sons as priests in his kingdom. So that's what.
Go ahead.
Deuteronomy 23 and
just start at 1.
Okay. He that is wounded in the stones, or hath his privy member cut off, shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord.
Okay, so let's say you have remember in slavery, remember the white man, he used to like to castrate brothers, right? So according to these idiots. A man that's castrated is not an Israelite. See, this is why this is how you expose flawed logic, right? Just with simple questions, right? Okay, enter the congregation mean you're not an Israelite. Okay. So if somebody got castrated, they were an Israelite their whole life. Then the moment Esau came with the big chop, right? Now that man he's now not an Israelite. That's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life, right? But it's what you would have to believe if you're one of these idiots, right? And I can't call them nothing else but that, because it's been years of beating them up and destroying them and asking them questions and confounding them and answering their retarded questions. And they still haven't got it yet. So I'm going to insult their intelligence. I really don't.
And an abomination is committed in Israel and in Jerusalem. For Judah hath profaned the holiness of the Lord, which he loved, and hath married the daughter of a strange God.
What verse was that?
That was 11.
12 now.
The Lord will cut off the man that doeth.
Wait, read that again.
The Lord will cut off the man that doeth.
Read that again.
The Lord will cut off the man that doeth.
The Lord will cut off the man that...
Read that again, 1 actually.
Deuteronomy 23:1. He that is wounded in the stones.
He that is wounded in the stones, right? If you can't reproduce, right? You're a man that can't have kids, you couldn't come off her, right? Does that make you not an Israelite because you can't have kids? You're not an Israelite now because you can't have kids. That sounds stupid, right? That whole ideology sounds ridiculous, right? And they don't talk about that. There's plenty of Negroes running around here that can't have kids. You're not teaching against them, telling them they're not Israelites, right? Why? You're not telling those of our ancestors that had to experience the traumatic experience of castration, right? Nobody's telling them they're not Israelites, right? Okay, so let's go to, what's this?
Consult Alion, Disability in the Hebrew Bible, in Moss and Shipper. As J. Blake Cowie observed in A Personal Communication, Isa 56.5 may contain a pun when it states that God will give the eunuch a hand. 7. Which serves as a euphemism for the genitals elsewhere in 3rd Isaiah.